King Charles visited the U.S. to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from Britain and to seek the release of a British hostage being held by an American terrorist.
What was meant to be another glamorous night in the spotlight quickly turned into a moment few expected. As cameras rolled and millions watched live, comedian Jimmy Carr unleashed a string of razor-sharp jokes that left Meghan Markle at the center of laughter across the studio. Within minutes, social media exploded with fierce reactions, dividing viewers over whether the roast was hilarious or simply too harsh. Do you think Jimmy crossed the line, or was it all fair game? Share your thoughts in the comments below. To help us create more videos and uncover the latest royal drama, please subscribe. Jimmy Carr unleashes brutal roasts. The atmosphere changed the moment Jimmy Carr turned his attention to Meghan Markle. Known for delivering jokes with a perfectly calm face, Carr never needed to shout or act angry. Instead, he simply dropped one cutting remark after another, letting the audience connect the dots themselves. That style made every punchline land even harder, and within seconds, the room was filled with laughter. One of his sharpest jokes centered on Meghan's long-standing public image as a passionate feminist.
I mean, it's my joke about her. I think it's a pretty good joke. I said Meghan Markle is, of course, a lifelong feminist, which she's demonstrated by marrying a prince and giving up her job.
Carr sarcastically remarked that she had shown this by marrying a prince and leaving her career behind. The audience immediately understood the irony, and the laughter only grew louder. It was exactly the kind of joke that walks a fine line between comedy and controversy, leaving people debating whether it was brilliantly clever or unnecessarily harsh. But Carr did not stop there. He followed up with another jab suggesting that Meghan's move to Britain had not been driven by romance alone. The joke implied that she had been searching for wealth, fame, and status before eventually finding Prince Harry. Whether viewers agreed or not, the punchline struck a nerve because it echoed criticisms that had circulated for years. The audience reacted with a mixture of shock and laughter, knowing they were watching a comedian willing to say what many others avoided saying on stage. Then came another moment that caught everyone by surprise. Carr joked about King Charles visiting America, twisting the royal trip into an absurd story by pretending the king had traveled there to celebrate American independence, while also trying to bring home a British hostage being held by Americans. The joke was completely ridiculous, but that absurdity was exactly what made it funny. Even the hosts seemed caught between laughing and wondering how far Carr was willing to push things. The jokes kept getting bolder. Meghan's reported Hollywood ambitions soon became the next target. Carr mocked the enormous expectations surrounding her media projects, joking that after promises of a massive comeback backed by huge deals and endless publicity, the public was instead left watching a cooking and lifestyle series that failed to attract the audience many expected. He exaggerated the disappointment by joking that the show ended up buried so far down the rankings that hardly anyone could find it. The crowd erupted because the humor was less about numbers and more about the contrast between sky-high expectations and the outcome. As each joke landed, it became clear that something unusual was happening. Carr was not relying on wild exaggerations or outrageous impressions. Instead, he delivered each line with such calm confidence that it almost sounded like he was simply reading a list of facts. That understated delivery somehow made every joke feel even more brutal, and before long, other comedians seemed encouraged to pile on with their own remarks. But all of that was only setting the stage for what many viewers later called the biggest part of the joke. What happened next left even seasoned comedians stunned. What was the one line that made the entire audience completely lose control? Stay glued to your screen because you won't want to miss what comes next. Fame without results. What makes the criticism even harder to ignore is that it isn't focused on one mistake or one interview. It comes from people asking the same question over and over. After receiving opportunities that most actors only dream about, what was actually done with them? Meghan was handed some of the biggest entertainment platforms in the world, with enormous budgets, global attention, and millions of curious viewers waiting to see what she would create. Expectations couldn't have been higher. Instead of delivering something unforgettable, many critics felt the projects revolved around simple, everyday moments that were presented as if they were groundbreaking discoveries. Whether it was sharing lifestyle tips, talking about personal habits, or demonstrating ordinary kitchen tricks, viewers struggled to understand why such basic ideas were being treated like major television events. To many people, it felt less like premium entertainment and more like expensive content wrapped in luxury packaging. The reaction was swift. Reviewers gave the series disappointing scores, while many audience members were even less impressed. Instead of becoming one of Netflix's biggest successes, the show quietly slipped far below the platform's most watched titles. Even the second season failed to create the comeback supporters had hoped for. For critics, it became another example of enormous expectations ending in quiet disappointment. Then came the jokes. Comedians couldn't resist pointing out the gap between the huge production deals and what eventually appeared on screen. Some mocked the idea that millions of dollars had been spent producing content centered on things as simple as cutting fruit or organizing snacks into different containers. Others joked that almost anyone could have made the same videos using a phone in their own kitchen. The questions didn't stop with Netflix. The couple's high-profile Spotify partnership also became a frequent target after ending much sooner than expected. One outspoken executive attached to the company even used the word grifters, a label that spread across headlines and social media almost overnight. Once that happened, late-night hosts, podcast personalities, and stand-up comedians suddenly had fresh material that practically wrote itself. Another point that comedians kept returning to was the couple's repeated calls for privacy. Critics argued there was an obvious contradiction between asking for a quieter life while continuing to appear in documentaries, interviews, podcasts, streaming projects, and social media conversations. The contrast became comedy gold. Even animated shows and satire programs turned the situation into memorable sketches, suggesting the pair wanted to escape public attention without ever stepping away from the spotlight. Perhaps what frustrated critics most was that many ordinary moments were introduced with the seriousness of major world-changing discoveries. Something as simple as transferring snacks from one bag into another or revealing personal nicknames became headline-worthy announcements, leaving many viewers wondering why such small details deserved so much attention. But if Jimmy Carr's jokes sparked headlines, he wasn't the only comedian aiming. Another comedian pulling Meghan soon joined the chorus, and one of them delivered a punchline that many people say hit even harder. Who was bold enough to go further, and why did that joke leave audiences roaring? Keep watching to find out. Meghan's harshest critics. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan tried to build a story around one central message. They said they wanted peace, privacy, and a chance to live away from endless public attention. But many critics believe their actions told a very different story, and that contradiction became impossible for some comedians to ignore. One of the loudest voices was comedian Bill Maher, who pointed out what he saw as the biggest flaw in their public image. If someone truly wants to escape the spotlight, why keep returning to it through interviews, documentaries, podcasts, and best-selling books? To many people, that question struck at the center of the debate. It wasn't simply about whether Harry and Meghan had suffered. It was about whether their actions matched the message they were selling. The criticism didn't stop there. Across comedy stages and television shows, the same theme kept appearing. Instead of seeing a couple fighting for freedom, many comedians joked that Harry and Meghan had turned personal complaints into a brand. Every new project seemed to revisit old wounds, keeping the same arguments alive instead of moving forward. Their story, critics argued, was no longer about healing, but about repeating the same painful chapters again and again. Kelly Osborne added fuel to the discussion by saying that hardship is something everyone experiences. In her view, struggles are not unique to celebrities or royalty. Millions of ordinary people deal with loss, pressure, and emotional pain every day without having global platforms to tell their stories. That opinion echoed what many viewers were already beginning to say online. Then came another twist. Some people admitted they had watched Harry and Meghan's documentary hoping to understand them better. Instead, they walked away feeling even less sympathetic. Rather than changing minds, the series appeared to reinforce the doubts that critics already had. The more explanations the couple offered, the more questions people seemed to ask. Even jokes involving other members of the royal family suggested that Harry and Meghan had become the biggest source of controversy surrounding the monarchy. And perhaps most surprising of all, the couple didn't receive the overwhelming support many expected from American audiences. While they certainly have loyal supporters, plenty of commentators openly admitted they simply weren't emotionally invested in the couple's ongoing battles. As more public figures started speaking without hesitation, it became clear that the conversation had shifted. The focus was no longer just on what Harry and Meghan had experienced, but on why they continued telling the same story in so many different ways. But beneath all the criticism lies an even bigger mystery. If attention was never the goal, then what does Meghan really want? Could the answer explain every move she's made since leaving the royal family? Stay right here as we uncover every detail. The victim narrative cracks. The more the public watched the story unfold, the more one question kept coming back. At what point does being treated unfairly stop being the whole story? Many people can understand hardship and even sympathize with painful experiences. But when every interview, every appearance, and every new project circles back to the same complaints, some begin to wonder if the message has started to lose its power. After leaving royal life, Meghan and Harry stepped into a position most people could only dream about. They had worldwide attention, enormous opportunities, financial security, and millions of people willing to hear their side. Yet, instead of moving forward with a fresh purpose, critics argue that they kept returning to old wounds. Over time, the focus shifted away from what they planned to build and toward what they claimed had been taken from them. That growing frustration did not stay limited to newspapers or social media. It eventually reached the comedy stage, where comedians began saying what many believed others were too afraid to joke about. One after another, famous stand-up performers questioned whether the victim narrative had simply gone on for too long. Then came one of the biggest moments. Chris Rock openly challenged some of the most talked-about claims from the royal drama. Rather than treating every accusation as unquestionable truth, he turned parts of the story into comedy, suggesting that not every uncomfortable family situation automatically pointed to something more sinister. His jokes sparked huge debates, but they also revealed something important. Once people start laughing at a public narrative instead of feeling sorry for it, changing their minds becomes much harder. The laughter did not stop there. Another comedian took the conversation in a completely different direction by reaching back into royal history. Instead of focusing only on today's headlines, he reminded audiences that Britain had faced a remarkably similar crisis decades earlier. He pointed to Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee whose relationship with the king shook the monarchy and changed its future forever. The comparison instantly caught people's attention. Whether fair or unfair, the idea suggested that history might not be repeating itself exactly, but it could be echoing in surprising ways. Once that connection entered public discussion, Meghan was no longer viewed only as a modern royal figure. To many critics, she became part of a much older pattern of outsiders, becoming central figures in royal turmoil. But that raises an even bigger question. If Meghan is being blamed for the chaos, is she really the only one responsible? Or has everyone overlooked the person whose choices made every twist possible? Why is Harry such a crucial part of this entire mess? And what role did he play behind the scenes that few are willing to admit? Let's take a look. Harry behind the chaos. The biggest question many critics keep asking is no longer whether Prince Harry left the royal family. Instead, they wonder how a man who was raised inside one of the world's oldest institutions, trained in the military, and expected to make difficult decisions, ended up looking so dependent on someone else's direction. That idea has become a favorite target for comedians. One comic joked that after spending years following royal rules, Harry finally escaped them, only to start following a completely different set. The joke wasn't really about palace life. It was about the belief that although Harry changed his surroundings, he may never have truly become independent. For years, every part of Harry's life was carefully managed. There were traditions to respect, family expectations to meet, and public responsibilities that shaped almost every decision. Leaving Britain was supposed to mean freedom, but critics argue that instead of writing his own story, Harry simply allowed someone else to hold the pen. Whether fair or unfair, that perception has become increasingly common in public discussions. The comparison with Prince William only makes the contrast even sharper. While Harry often finds himself at the center of controversy, William is usually described as calm, measured, and focused on duty. Even comedians who are famous for mocking everyone seem to treat the two brothers differently. Jimmy Carr once shared a light-hearted story about meeting the royal family. Before the event, he joked about proper etiquette and even playfully imagined introducing himself to the Queen in an overly casual way. Hours later, when he actually met Prince William, the encounter turned into a surprisingly warm moment. William greeted him politely, remembered his name, and left Carr with a positive impression.
Yeah. And I get a tap on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's Prince William. And he goes, "Mr. Carr?"
That small story mattered because it showed something unexpected. A comedian known for sharp jokes and brutal punchlines had very little to mock when talking about William. Yet when the conversation turned to Harry, the material seemed endless. For many comics, Harry had become an easy target because every interview, documentary, or public appearance created another opportunity for satire. Then came an even harsher opinion aimed at Meghan. Some commentators argued that her greatest ambition had always been worldwide fame, and that marrying Harry gave her a level of recognition few people could ever dream of. They claimed that without that relationship, she might never have reached the same level of global attention. Whether people agree with that view or strongly reject it, those comments spread quickly across television, podcasts, and social media, adding even more fuel to an already heated debate. But one conversation would soon push the criticism even further than most people expected. During a podcast appearance, Kelly Osborne didn't hold back, and her words challenged the entire narrative surrounding Harry and Meghan. Did she expose something millions were already thinking but were afraid to say? Stay tuned, because a podcast from Kelly Osborne shattered it all. Kelly Osborne's podcast bombshell. The sharpest criticism didn't come from a stand-up stage. It came during a podcast conversation where someone who had once moved in the same celebrity circles decided not to hold back.
I think he's a whining, whinging, complaining, woe is me, I'm the only one that's ever had mental problems.
Kelly Osborne wasn't speaking as a stranger. She had followed Harry's story for years and could easily have chosen softer words. Instead, she delivered an opinion that immediately caught people's attention. Her argument was simple. She believed Harry and Meghan had been given opportunities that most people spend an entire lifetime chasing. Huge streaming contracts, podcast deals, worldwide publicity, and constant media attention landed in their hands. Yet despite having every possible advantage, she argued they failed to produce projects that truly connected with audiences. According to Kelly, the problem wasn't bad luck. It wasn't timing. It wasn't a lack of support. She believed the bigger issue was that there simply wasn't enough substance behind the brand. In her view, the opportunities kept getting bigger, while the results kept getting smaller. Then she turned her attention to Prince Harry himself, and that's when the conversation became even more uncomfortable. She reminded listeners of one of the most controversial moments from his younger years when he faced worldwide criticism after wearing a Nazi costume to a party. Her point wasn't just about that mistake. It was about the dramatic contrast between the man who once made headlines for poor judgment and the person who now often speaks publicly about morality, responsibility, and how society should behave. That comparison left the room noticeably quieter. Whether people agreed with her or not, it forced listeners to think about how public images are rebuilt, and whether audiences are willing to forget the past. Kelly also questioned why new opportunities continued to appear after every setback. Streaming deals struggled. Business ventures received mixed reactions. New brands launched with enormous publicity, but often failed to meet expectations. Yet another project always seemed to be waiting around the corner. Critics argue that much of this continued interest comes from one undeniable fact. The connection to the British royal family remains one of the most valuable brands in the world. Even after stepping away from royal duties, Harry and Meghan still attract headlines simply because of who they are and where they came from. That royal connection keeps doors open that might close for almost anyone else. But for many comedians, this was never about one unsuccessful series or one podcast that ended early. They believed the real contradiction was much deeper. It is difficult, they argued, to present yourself as an ordinary, relatable victim while living a life filled with luxury homes, private flights, major media contracts, and global fame. That contrast became the foundation for countless jokes because it reflected what many viewers were already thinking. In the eyes of these critics, comedians didn't create the public's doubts. They simply gave those doubts a microphone. The disappointing ratings, canceled partnerships, and repeated business struggles had already started the conversation long before the punchlines arrived. But this raises an even bigger question that goes far beyond comedy. Is the public confusing two completely different kinds of fame? And could that misunderstanding explain why so many celebrity projects struggle after leaving the palace? The difference between royal popularity and celebrity popularity. Why does one command lifelong respect while the other can disappear overnight? Let's explore. Royalty versus celebrity fame. One of the biggest reasons Meghan Markle continues to divide public opinion is the difference between being a royal and being a celebrity. At first glance, the two worlds seem almost the same. Both come with fame, public attention, expensive events, and endless media coverage. But the way success is measured in each world is completely different, and that difference has become impossible to ignore. Prince William and Princess Catherine have spent years following a simple approach. They rarely give personal interviews. They rarely respond to criticism directly. Instead, they let their public appearances, charity work, and royal duties speak for them. Whether people agree with every decision they make or not, many admire the consistency of their approach. They appear, carry out their responsibilities, and move on without constantly explaining themselves. Harry and Meghan chose a very different path after stepping away from royal duties. Rather than remaining silent, they decided to tell their own story through television interviews, documentaries, podcasts, books, and public appearances. Their goal was clear: to regain control of their narrative and let the world hear their side of events. While many supporters welcomed that openness, others felt they were hearing the same grievances repeated too often. That contrast has shaped public opinion in unexpected ways. According to regular polling by YouGov, William and Catherine have generally maintained stronger popularity ratings than Harry and Meghan, despite speaking publicly far less often. Many observers believe this reflects an old saying: sometimes, the less people hear from public figures, the more curious and respectful they remain. When every opinion, feeling, and disagreement becomes public, that mystery begins to disappear. This difference also explains why comedians have found Harry and Meghan such easy targets. Comedy often feeds on contradictions, and critics argue they see one here. The couple left royal life seeking greater privacy. yet they have shared intimate details through multiple high-profile media projects. Whether people agree with that criticism or not, it has become one of the biggest talking points surrounding their public image. Meanwhile, William and Catherine have largely avoided becoming regular subjects of the same kind of satire. Their quieter approach leaves fewer headlines to turn into punchlines. In today's world of non-stop news and social media, silence can sometimes be more powerful than constant visibility. That doesn't mean one strategy is automatically right and the other is wrong. Every public figure chooses how to connect with audiences, but the reactions have shown that royal popularity is built differently from celebrity popularity. One depends heavily on duty, tradition, and restraint, while the other often relies on visibility, personal storytelling, and staying relevant in an increasingly crowded entertainment world. And that raises another fascinating question. If public perception isn't shaped only by what celebrities do, but by how those actions are turned into jokes, then how does one comedian repeatedly deliver the sharpest punchlines without ever raising his voice? Jimmy Carr's comedy style may hold the surprising answer, so keep watching, because what makes his jokes so devastating might not be what you think. Why Carr's jokes go viral. One reason Jimmy Carr's jokes spread so quickly online isn't simply because they're funny. It's because of the unique way he delivers them. Many comedians rely on loud voices, exaggerated facial expressions, or dramatic movements to make a punchline land. Carr does almost the opposite. He often stands calmly, speaks in an even tone, and delivers some of the harshest jokes with the expression of someone reading a shopping list. That contrast catches audiences off guard, making the joke feel even sharper. His trademark deadpan delivery has become one of the biggest reasons clips from his stand-up shows are shared across social media. He rarely looks angry or emotional. Instead, he lets the words do all the work. When he says something controversial without changing his tone, the audience is left wondering for a split second whether he really said it. That brief moment of surprise is exactly what makes people laugh before they even realize why. Carr is also known for embracing dark humor. Rather than avoiding sensitive subjects, he often walks straight toward them. He jokes about politics, celebrities, history, religion, and even topics that many comedians wouldn't dare touch. This fearless approach has earned him millions of fans, but it has also attracted criticism. Some people admire his willingness to joke about anything, while others believe he sometimes pushes the limits too far. That debate only makes his performances more talked about. Another important part of his style is shock value. Carr understands that audiences remember jokes that catch them completely by surprise. He carefully builds a sentence in one direction before suddenly twisting it into an unexpected ending. The audience thinks they know where he's going, only to discover they were wrong. That unexpected turn creates the biggest laughs and makes the clip more likely to go viral online. His delivery also changes the way controversial jokes are received. If the same words were shouted in anger or spoken during a serious interview, they might sound cruel or offensive. But because Carr delivers them with perfect timing inside a comedy routine, surrounded by an audience already prepared to laugh, the atmosphere changes. Laughter creates a sense that everyone is sharing the joke together, softening comments that might otherwise feel much harsher. This is especially noticeable when he jokes about famous people. Carr often avoids lengthy personal attacks. Instead, he reduces a complicated public story into one quick observation that audiences instantly recognize. In just a few seconds, he captures the contradiction or irony that many people have already noticed, turning it into a memorable punchline. That's why his jokes are quoted so often. They're short, direct, and easy to remember. His confidence also plays a major role. Carr rarely hesitates or apologizes before delivering a risky joke. He commits fully to the punchline, trusting the audience to understand that they are watching a comedy performance, not a political speech or a news report. Whether people love his style or dislike it, there is little doubt that he has mastered the art of making audiences react. His combination of deadpan delivery, dark humor, surprise, and fearless confidence has made him one of Britain's most recognizable comedians, and explains why so many of his routines continue to dominate conversations long after the laughter fades. So, what do you think? Did Meghan deserve those remarks from Jimmy Carr? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.